Hi, this is Karen Strassman from Cheepshow, Preacher, Bosch, Resident Evil 2, and the Onania Club. And you're listening to the Man Cave Chronicles.
Welcome to another episode of the Man Cave Chronicles.
Welcome to the party, pal!
You're my boy, Blue!
Yo, Adrian!
A podcast with interviews of amazing guests from the world of pop culture.
Oh, yeah!
TV.
Nice!
Movies.
Oh, I love the movies!
Comedy and more. From deep inside the Man Cave, your host, Elias.
Karen, welcome to the cave.
Hey, thank you.
How are you? What's new with you?
I am good. You're catching me today between jobs. I just did pick up recordings on a big video game that I'm not allowed to talk about this morning. And now I'm heading to coach a few clients with voiceover and dialect coaching, and then I'm heading out to another video game session after that this afternoon.
Oh, you're busy. You've been busy the last few years. A lot of projects.
Yeah. It's been really fun. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, I did some research on you. So you had numerous TV appearances on shows, and like you said, voiceover. Some of the shows you've done was Preacher, Silicon Valley, and then Call of Duty, Halo, and we'll talk about that. Let's get the listeners a little bit more about you. Where are you originally from?
I grew up in Washington, D.C. as a kid. My father is originally from New York, and my mom was from Denmark. So half my family still lives in Denmark because my mom met my dad in Copenhagen when she was a student, and he took her over to the States on a round-trip ticket that she never used the return flight.
Wow.
So she arrived in the States at 20 years old.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm from a culture of half American and half Danish, and I speak Danish like a 3-year-old. But I love the language, and I love the people. And then when I was a student, I moved to Paris, and I ended up living there for 16 years. And I worked there as a dialect coach in theater, TV, film, and voiceover. So I was in a lot of TV shows over there and movies over there, and did a lot of theater, both in French and English. And then I moved to California about 10 years ago.
What made you move to France?
Sorry?
So what made you move to France?
When I just wanted to study in another country. I've always felt part American, but I've always felt part from somewhere else, be it from Denmark or from somewhere else. And I had taken like a year or two in Boston in college, and I just felt restless, and I was trying to figure out who I was, and probably being a little too wild in a way that wasn't productive. And so I thought, let me go study in Denmark. And then I thought, well, why don't I go study in a country where I can learn a new language? And I went to France for a year. Wow. And while I was there, I got offered a position as a dialect coach for this big studio that was coaching French actors to act in English for movies and television in France, just because there's a lot of co-productions that come through town.
Wow.
And they need for people to be able to speak English. So I started doing that, and it was just a fluke, but I was really good at it. And they offered me a full-time job the following year. And while I was coaching, I was on TV sets and stuff in France. And one time the director said, "Oh, little Karen, she's so cute. We give her a role." So I started working in French television and got an agent. And then I went back to school there, and I studied at the French National Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, where you learn fencing and stage combat. And I worked on Shakespeare in French and Molière and Racine. And once a week I would go into the Bois de Boulogne and learn horseback riding. And it was magical. And then from there on, I just started getting work in French film and television. And I started dubbing a lot of films into English, and I started doing a lot of animation and video game work in English, actually, because they do a lot of their original versions in Europe in English, so that it sells in the international market.
Wow. Now,
So it just all kind of unfolded like that,
That's
which is
interesting.
really funny because when I was in high school, since I was a kid, acting was always my first love, and I never thought that I was good enough. I never thought that I was pretty enough or tall enough or talented enough. And people told me, well, you're not pretty enough to do TV and film, but you're not like, you don't have an interesting enough face to do like character work. And I believed them. And so the cool thing is that I was just following the things that I was passionate about, and life led me to where I had always dreamed to be anyway, which is a really good lesson about not listening to those voices, be it outside voices or inside voices, and,
That's
just
great.
step by step following your heart,
Like people say, when you have a passion about something, always ignore the noise from other people.
Yeah, I've really learned that. Because people have so many different reasons for saying what they say.
Correct.
And most of the times it really isn't about you.
So you said, you wanted to get into the acting world growing up. Was it a specific movie or TV show that you're watching one day and you're like, this is what I want to go do?
It's really strange. It's just something I wanted to do since I was a little kid. I would make up plays in the basement. And I would be in the school plays when I was in kindergarten. I think when I was 13 years old, I think, I got into a production of The Miracle Worker in my high school, which is the story of Helen Keller when she was a very little girl, and she was blind and deaf and couldn't speak because she couldn't hear herself or she didn't know that language existed. She didn't know that people communicated.
Yeah.
So this little girl who was blind and deaf and just basically living with her family like an animal, like a family pet. And they were going to put her in an insane asylum. And there was a woman named Annie Sullivan who they hired basically just to make her domestic, to train her, that she wouldn't walk around the table and eat off people's like that. And a miracle happened. And it still moves me to this day. But Annie was able to, by some miracle, help Helen Keller understand that people spoke to each other and communicated, and there was language. And she taught Helen Keller sign language in her hand, and the letters and words of things, like she'd spell DOLL in her hand. And for a long time, Helen just thought it was a game. And one day, at the end of the play, Helen realizes, oh my God, there's a world out there.
Yeah.
So I got to play Helen Keller.
That's great.
And I walked around. I did my homework as fast as I could, and I get to the theater to rehearse every afternoon, and I just blindfold myself and walk around the stage and imagine what it was like to be blind. And I think it was my first real taste of connecting empathetically to another soul so deeply, and being able to tell a story about that soul and move people through that. And I think from then on, I've always been hooked. That's always been my love and my passion.
Yeah. Did you, so after you finished school and everything, did you take acting classes? How did that, what was the next step after that?
Well, I've taken acting classes all my life because I loved it so much. But when I went to France, I was studying psychology and French because I thought, well, I can use my empathetic nature to be a therapist. And then because I got that internship as a dialect coach, and things kind of unfolded from there. But I've always done plays ever since I was a little girl and taken acting classes. And I continue to, throughout my years in France, I was still taking acting classes. And even now I have an acting class that I go to once, I'm an acting coach and I coach other people, but I go to see my own coach once a week. His name is Robert Colt, and you can find him online, and he's changed my life. So I continue to go to acting classes even today because I feel like being an actor, it's very similar to being the dancer. Dancers have to show up at the bar and work their instrument, and we do too.
Yeah. So what made you decide to move back to the States?
I kind of felt like I wasn't growing anymore. And I've always again, since I was a little kid, I've always wanted to do American film and television. And it just, again, it never seemed possible because at those times I just didn't believe that I was pretty enough or talented enough or good enough or, all those things. And finally I got to a place, my mom had just died of cancer at the age of 59. And I realized that life might be a little bit shorter than I had envisaged it. And I kind of took a look at the dreams and hopes I had in my life. And I looked at them thinking, Karen, if you really want to do some of these things, you should decide when you're going to do them or choose not to do them at all. And I thought, I want to go try and make things happen in the center of film and TV in Hollywood.
Wow.
And I thought, I didn't know anybody. I knew nobody there. And I had quite a decent career for myself in France. I was making good money. Everybody knew me. I was very well established and doing very well. But Los Angeles is kind of the center of things. If you want to be part of the Olympics, then that you have to go to the Olympics, and this is sort of where the Olympics takes place, metaphorically speaking. And I thought, well, if I were on my deathbed, would I regret more staying in France and never even having tried and not knowing? Or would I regret more going, letting go of everything that I have in France and trying and then failing? And I thought I would regret more never having tried. So I'm going to risk going there and failing. And I did that, and it's just been so sweet. I'm in a town where everybody sort of understands, but most people are either aware of the business or in the business, and I spend my days doing what I love.
That's great. So when you first moved back, what was one of the first gigs that you landed?
Oh, let's see. One of the first gigs I landed when I moved back into town, I'll tell you the voiceover gig, and then I'll tell you the on-camera gig.
Okay.
Voiceover was one of the first projects, was a beautiful anime project called Haibane Renmei. And if the listeners listeners who like anime, if you don't know it, look it up. If you like poetic anime, it is just beautiful and poetic and metaphoric. Haibane Renmei. My first voiceover job, I believe, or one of them. And I think one of my first TV jobs was either Gilmore Girls or a show called Medical Investigation. The show called Medical Investigation, I played a woman who had breast implants and who had caught a horrible disease and was dying. And it was a wonderful role because I got to be on set for a week and a half because I was in a hospital bed while a lot of other actors acted around me.
Wow.
So it really made me very comfortable with, the TV scene here.
Yeah.
And in Gilmore Girls, I played a French stuck-up housekeeper, a French maid that her mother had hired. She in the show, she keeps on hiring all of these different these cameos. So
yeah, that's great.
So those are some of my first.
And recently, now you started on Amazon's Bosch. How did you get approached for that role?
I was offered an opportunity to audition, and it was actually, as actors, sometimes we have a few days to prepare, sometimes we don't. And this one was actually what they call a day of audition, which means that I got the notice for it and the call for it, I don't know, maybe 10 a.m. in the morning, and I had to show up at 4 p.m. And I didn't even have time to memorize the words. I just, worked on it, thought about it, and went in there and read for it. We as actors, we audition a lot. Somebody said recently, somebody I was talking with from SAG-AFTRA, that basically the average audition kind of booking rate for an actor in Los Angeles is 1 out of 30 auditions you book.
Wow.
Because the competition is so fierce here, and they really can have their pick. You have two wonderful actors, but one is brunette and she looks a little too much like the lead actress, so they don't want to hire her, even though maybe she was better, so they'll hire the blonde, or they might think that I'm wonderful, but if it's for a role of the mom and all of a sudden, I don't match the kids, or the kids don't match me, or they find a better match, or of all the people who audition, the producer's wife's best friend auditions and she just so happens to get the role, which, is understandable too. People want to work with who they know and care about. So there's so much competition. I'm always kind of surprised whenever I book anything. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And luckily I still continue to book a lot, but I audition a lot. So that Bosch happened like that. Suddenly I was put on a veil for it. And then suddenly I got a call and they said, we'd like to book you on this. And then the role became recurring. And I was written into a storyline I was in several episodes, and then they ended up cutting most of that storyline because of time. They had too many stories going on for the amount of air time that they had. So a whole bunch of my storyline got cut out, which happens too. But I love being on the show.
Yeah, and you play Laura, right? Laura Tribe.
Yeah, Laura Tribe, DDA Laura Tribe. And on set, they actually had a DA, a deputy assistant, who was a woman, and from, a police precinct. And I got to talk to her for quite a while and ask her, if you were in my position and you were preparing this witness for the witness stand, how would you be with the witness? Tell me about what the case would involve. And I learned so much that day. And I was able to, play the role sort of really informed by reality, which is one of the things that I think Bosch is so good at, and what they're known for in this town is by being so true to life and so real,
And you also recently were on AMC Series Preacher. Tell us about that role.
Oh, Preacher was so much fun. I play a German, well, maybe she's not evil, maybe she's good, but a seemingly evil German scientist named Dr. Lois Slotnick. And when I auditioned for it, they had actually spent a week or two auditioning men for the role, and they weren't happy with what they were getting, or they wanted to change it. So they reissued the audition for women. And when I got it, I looked at it, and they didn't really say much about the character. They said just, a passionate scientist was basically what they wanted. And so I gave them a take kind of in that sort of realm with glasses and a scientist and everything. And then, because it was a tape that I was putting on tape for the East Coast. And then before we sent the tape, I said to my friend who was helping me tape it, I said, I can't explain it, but I just like jonesing to do this with a German accent, because I think it would be so much fun. And I said, you know what, even if we don't send it, let's just do it for me to get it out of my system, because I just so want to do it that way. I feel like the words aren't working good with American, and it's just really calling to me to do it that way. And so we did it, and we looked at it, we're like, that's pretty cool. So we said, even though they didn't ask for any accents, let's just submit it anyway and just see. And I submitted it, and then I got a call back, and I worked on it with the director over Skype, and they booked me for it, which is a really cool lesson, too, to, like, if you have an instinct that doesn't necessarily seem completely right, follow it anyway.
Yeah. Wow.
And being on set was just a delight. That show is so cool because they're all comic book characters, so in some ways, they're all very broad, but the actors are so good, and it's written so well that I personally just fall in love and relate to every single character, because even though they're broad characters that you might not see walking around on the street, unless you're on Hollywood Boulevard, they made them so human and so real. And that's what I tried to do when I played this German scientist, is really kind of push the envelope, and for people who watch her on screen, she has her hair pulled back, and she's very strict looking with little science glasses. And very precise and everything. But I also wanted there to be a sense that she could be a real person, you know.
Do you enjoy playing like the good guys or like the evil people better?
Do I like playing the what?
Do you like playing the good guy character or like the evil character better? What do you enjoy more?
I like playing people who are conflicted. I think just the purely good is not as fascinating to me. Although it's beautiful. I think what's really fun is to play complex characters. So say a character is a really good person, but they've been wounded in their life. And so they're trying to do the right thing in the face of, you know, other things they're struggling for their past. And I do enjoy playing sort of what might be termed evil characters or characters who you really see their shadow side.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody the other day, like, I think I grew up just trying to do everything right and be a good girl all the time, and be a people pleaser. And for me, it's a real relief to just delve into my shadow side and admit that I'm an actual human being with, you know, things about me that aren't very beautiful, and, you know, things about me that are ugly, and things about, you know, that I won't necessarily act on, but I'm human. And I think it's really healing to admit that we have all those parts inside us. I think it kind of brings us closer to all of humanity to go, well, we're all broken, you know, none of us are perfect, and we're all trying to do the right thing in our own perception of reality.
Yeah.
And I like playing characters and finding that, and also bringing that dynamic to life, you know. And when I was younger, it was different. I liked just playing the good characters. But I think, you know, as in any piece of music or symphony, what makes the lighter notes seem so beautiful is the contrast of the darker notes that are there. And I like to get to play those from time to time too, you know. But I also love like silly, light comedy and being quirky and, you know, things like that as well. Like my character in Weeds, who is very, very quirky.
So we mentioned earlier that you've also done video game like voiceover. Like, how did you fall into like that part of the field with video games?
That started in France. I started recording video games in France. You know, again, products that they wanted to sell in an international market, so they were recording them in English. And then once I moved to the States, you know, I made a name for myself as a voiceover artist and had already had hundreds of, you know, projects behind me in my wake. So when I got to the States, I just immediately got a voiceover agent and just started working video games here as well. And I've done like literally hundreds of them.
Yeah. What's been your favorite?
Oh, that's hard because games are so different. I have different ones that I have a real affection for different reasons. I have a real affection for the character Chromie, who shows up in various Blizzard projects, World of Warcraft, and a whole bunch of other Blizzard projects. She's just got this. She's a gnome. She's a gnome, but she's really very, very forgetful because she travels in time, so she never knows whether she's in the future or in the past. And she turns into a dragon and fights, and she's just so much fun. And the writers for Blizzard are just so fantastic. I just love their writing, and I love the company, the whole company. I love working for Blizzard. They're a fantastic company to work for. They're writers, they're developers. They've got a gal in charge of the voiceover department, Andrea Toyas, who just cares more about actors than anybody I know and makes sure that we don't hurt ourselves when we scream and makes wonderful creative decisions. So I love that company and anything they do. I love playing Poison and Tekken because she's just tough and fun. And Melina and Katana in Mortal Kombat, I love playing them for the same reason. I just love that tough side.
Yeah.
In a game called Persona, in 2 iterations of the game, I play a very gentle robot human named Igus, who's kind of a fan favorite because she's a robot, but she yearns to experience what it's like to be human and is willing to give up her superpowers just to experience what it's like to feel love and feel emotion, which is just so moving. And I play another character in Persona named Nanako, who's a little girl, and she just has this innocent, sweet, beautiful spirit. And I think she really touches people. I love playing Rouge the Bat in Sonic because she's so sexy and fun. And I love doing motion capture, and I've done a bunch of motion capture recently. Did a lead role in Wolfenstein 2, and I just did one of the leads in Resident Evil 2. Annette Birkin, who is an evil scientist, although she is conflicted and not necessarily that evil, if you sort of understand what she's up against. And so that was motion capture, where you're put in one of those black suits with all of the receptors, and they capture your acting and your voice at the same time.
How fun was that?
Oh gosh, it's just like motion capture is one of the most challenging acting situations I think I know of, because you don't have anything really. You're in this, so you're not dressed like the character, and you're in this black suit that's like kind of uncomfortable, and then you have a camera and a microphone strapped around your head, and like it's sitting in front of your face. So when you're looking at the other actor, you're basically just seeing this thing in the front of your face that's recording all of your face. And you can't get that close to the other characters because you're all rigged up. And there's really no set. There's just, like in Wolfenstein 2, they put a table out and gave us a stick for pool cues. And, if you're driving, they'll give you a chair and a wheel if you're in a spaceship. I mean, everything is like you're a little kid playing in your backyard and picking up, a branch and pretending it's a sword. And you have to imagine absolutely everything and make it real when there's nothing real to hang on to. Because regular voiceover, you can you're standing in front of the mic and you can just close your eyes and you're not rigged up all funny, and you can imagine yourself in that world. And of course, when you're on set, they have everything there around you and you just feel like you're in that real place.
Yeah.
I was just shooting an episode of Penny Dreadful in Los Angeles, which is going to be so cool. And I was on set with 200 extras. I had one of the day player roles, and I was there for a day. I had a really fun role, which I can't talk about, but we were on a location, and it was like being dropped in the middle of the 40s, the 30s or the 40s. Everybody was dressed up. The whole set was dressed like it was in that time period. And it was really as if I'd gone back in time and I was completely in that time period. So it was so easy to believe that I was that person living in that time. But on motion capture, you don't have that. So it really kind of tests your acting skills, and it's a wonderful challenge and so much fun.
So what do you enjoy doing more, being in front of the camera or voiceover?
They're both kind of home for me. I just, the minute I walk into a studio in front of a mic, I just feel like home. It's just home, and so I love that feeling. I think at this point in my life and career, I get most excited about on-camera work. There's something about standing there with another actor or a bunch of other actors, looking them in the eye and, allowing them to affect you and feeling something and responding as your character and just completely losing yourself in the reality of that story and that world. Whereas with voiceover, most often you have to imagine that the other characters are talking to you. And on camera, you're just right there with all the other people. And, people have spent weeks or months preparing a set, building things that maybe will only be used that one day on that particular set. You know, and there's been a huge investment in wardrobe and the makeup artists, and people have designed exactly the feeling of the lights and the color scheme. And you arrive on that day, you know, and your job is to look those other actors in the eye and go to someplace magical and make magic happen. And it's so exhilarating.
Do you what other future projects do you have coming out that you are allowed to talk about?
Well, Creepshow is going to be coming out this Thursday, the 24th. And I play opposite David Arquette, and I can't talk about the storyline, but it was so much fun. I spent quite a few long days on set, ending at 4 a.m. in the morning, covered with blood. And it's just real fun horror. And I think people will really enjoy it. So that's coming out Thursday, the 24th, and that's on Shudder TV, which it's an AMC shoot off, and you can sign up for it online. I think they give you a 7-day trial. I just shot Penny Dreadful. There's some things that I can't talk about. I have the film The Onania Club coming out soon, which is a film by the infamous director Tom Six of the Human Centipede series. So it's a very different movie. Very, very different. It's more of a psychological thriller. But it's very bold and very daring, and will probably be very controversial and disturbing. And I'm really proud of the message that we're daring to imply. So that's going to be really interesting when it comes out.
That's great.
And I have a whole bunch of video games coming out too, but I don't know what I can talk about quite yet. I think there's some more Sonic that just came out. Stuff that I can talk about, I guess people can look on my IMDb. But there's, I think I need to be safe and not talk about the other video games right now.
Yeah.
So,
like I said, you've been very busy from what I saw.
yeah.
So lastly, how can the listeners find you on social media?
Instagram is a great place. I think I'm most active on Instagram right now. And people feel free to interact with me. I always try and respond to people as soon as I can. And I also have a Facebook fan page that I'm fairly active on. And I'm also on Twitter. Twitter, I don't get to, like Instagram, I'm on all the time, every day, and Facebook as well. And Twitter, I'll post, but I'm not as fast at replying to fans, but you can definitely follow me there because I post a bunch there. And those are all just my name at Karen Strassman. And I have a website, which is www.karenstrassman.com.
All right, Karen, thank you for coming on. This was a fantastic interview with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
This was so much fun.